Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of A Handful of Hope. I'm so happy and grateful to have Seth with us here today, who's the CEO and founder of Mission Wealth, a leading wealth management company that specializes in comprehensive financial planning and investment advisory services for high net worth individuals across the country. A thought leader in the area of conscious financial planning, Seth helps people reframe their perspective of wealth beyond just the financial so that they can enjoy more balanced, impactful, and fulfilled lives. Seth was recognized by Real Leaders magazine in 2015 as one of the top 100 visionary leaders who strive to create a better world due to his work in conscious finance. Seth's experience in finance and the pursuit of well-being has caused him to become a sought-after speaker. In 2016, Seth was asked to speak on the TEDx Stage to share his powerful message on redefining wealth. And in 2017, he was chosen to speak at and facilitate at the Young Presidents Organization YPO Global Leadership Conference. His 2018 Developing Your 3.0 Vision for Life 4-day International YPO event won the most impactful learning event of the year globally. Seth's passion is working with YPO chapters, forums, and members to help them develop and ignite a meaningful 3.0 vision for life and success. He's the chair of the Inspired Living Sub-Network of the YPO Health and Wellness Network. Seth is a founding member, officer, and board member of the YPO Pacific One Regional Chapter. As the founder of the nonprofit sustainablefuture.org, in 2017, Seth is growing a community unifying platform to empower positive daily actions in the areas of sustainable volunteerism and wellness. Campaigns utilizing the platform have been launched by businesses, nonprofits, schools, universities, and churches. Seth resides in Santa Barbara, California with his 2 teenage children. He enjoys travel, connecting, and fascinating people, continuous learning, and constant pursuit of finding the world's best chocolate chip cookie. Seth, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jesse. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, man. So you kind of teed it up there in that bio. I have to ask, where is the world's best chocolate chip cookie so far?
Hey, I'm still in pursuit. I'm like Don Quixote. I'm constantly trying to find the best cookie, and everywhere I go, I ask around, hey, what's the best chocolate chip cookie in this town? It makes for a fun, ongoing kind of quest.
It really does. It's I always had those little ones. I for a while I was doing the best buffet in Las Vegas and had an Excel spreadsheet where I'd go and keep track of them and start grading them based off of, time acquiring, ease of access, quality of food, quality of service, all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So Seth, you're a fascinating guy. You have lots of cool stuff going on, and I think maybe we could start with just what is redefining wealth? I think that is a topic of conversation that I've heard more and more as of lately, especially at the time of this recording, it's the end of May 2020. We're kind of coming at the tail end of the shelter in place quarantine with COVID. And it's afforded many of us this opportunity where maybe we haven't been working as much, where the economy is big in question, but it's afforded us this opportunity to spend more time in nature, spend more time with family. And for me, when I step aside my own individual personal fears, I've also recognized I've had some of the most blissful, happy moments of my life during this time, and just the simplicity of it. And I think it has people really starting to ask the question of what does wealth really mean, where we were once taught that maybe wealth and money are the same thing. So what is redefining wealth?
Right. Well, I agree that right now with COVID, it's been a great opportunity for us to kind of reflect and ask ourselves, what is wealth? What is success? Because Jesse, I think a lot of us have been on this treadmill of a scripted path to success, where we've busted our butt in school. We maybe went to grad school. We started off in our careers. Maybe we started businesses. We just put our head down and whatever it took, late night emails, commuting, I'm going to achieve success. Because at the end of the day, we're worried if we don't, we won't be worthy. Right? If I don't achieve a certain level of success, and maybe that's a milestone of a net worth, or maybe that's a milestone of a car or a house or a certain lifestyle, then I'm not going to be enough. And what redefining wealth is really all about is helping people to realize that there's many dimensions of wealth beyond the balance sheet. So I've actually come up with 11 different dimensions of wealth, only one of which is financial. So, the quality of our physical body, how we look, feel, and function is a dimension of wealth right now that obviously a lot of people are realizing with the prioritization around the physical distancing. The level of impact we feel like we're having in the world, the quality of our relationships, our social capital, how much we're growing intellectually, how much fun we have in our life, our spiritual development. All these are other dimensions of wealth that really shouldn't be ignored. But again, when we're on that treadmill, following that scripted path of success, sometimes they do get pushed down because, we sacrifice family time. We sacrifice workouts because we are so busy. I'm so busy. How are you doing? Busy. That's a common answer. And I think with COVID, we've had the opportunity to kind of hit the pause button a bit and to reflect, wow, this is what it feels like to slow down. This is what it feels like to connect more deeply with my family and friends. This is what it feels like to have more time in nature and more walks and, just a slower pace of life, less travel, less going out and being, at shows and at restaurants. And so I see this really as an opportunity for many people to reflect and kind of awaken to a degree as to what fuels them when it comes to a path of success, a path of fulfillment. So in that way, I see COVID as being really a huge opportunity.
I appreciate that so much, Seth, because when I reflect back on these last couple months, it's been funny, like having these own introspective moments of my life and in context with the financial piece. Last couple months, I've probably made the least amount of money I've made professionally in the last however many years.
Mm-hmm.
I've traveled the least amount I have. I've gone out the least amount of times, all those types of things. So the other side of it, I've cooked more meals at home. I've spent more time just kind of really admiring my neighborhood, my neighbors, like making eye contact with people, smiling, going for little casual walks, playing string with cats, things like that. And it's been amazing to see that in that, how blissful some of those moments have been, or I've allowed them to be. And then when I start to put that in context with how I've lived my life, I realize that so much of it was like a hurry up onto the next. Even with travel, like I love to travel, but often the travel would be like, it would be so methodical of getting in there, getting on the plane, almost militant, right? Get to the hotel, get the laptop off, get the stuff done, get up, go do the things, go do the touristy, take the selfie, get on that, go back, get right back to the grind. And then when people would ask me, like if you would ask me 6 months ago, how you doing? I would have said, oh man, super busy, got this, and this. And it was almost like that proverbial measuring stick of, hey, who's got more on our plate right now? And to take that away, it has been so unbelievably freeing. And then I think about, why am I even doing that in the first place? I'm doing it probably because I want to be able to slow down at some point and have more time with the people I love and care about.
Exactly. And yet you're having it right now, and you realize I didn't have to wait. I didn't have to defer living by being busy until I could finally be a being instead of a doing. And, when we think about our own worth, I just encourage people to think about your many other assets you have. So like you said, maybe you haven't earned as much money the last few months, but maybe you've had more time for creativity, and you've started to doodle, or you've started to paint, or you started to play music, or you started to meditate more. So your artistic capital has grown. Maybe you've come up with new ideas, like this show that you're doing is incredible with almost 100 guests so far. Your intellectual capital has grown. Maybe you've developed deeper relationships with people and you've worked your network to a degree. Your goodwill capital has grown. These are other forms of wealth that we have that arguably are far more valuable than an IRA or a 401k or a real estate holding, because these are how we can be fully expressed into the world. And these assets are how we can make the biggest contribution to others. So it's really an opportunity to think about, what is wealth? What are the gifts that I have to deploy? And how have I not been fully expressing those gifts? Because what the world needs are people who come alive, being vulnerable and bold in how they express their natural talents. And I think COVID is helping people, especially for the soon to be 25 million unemployed, right? There's people who are wondering, gosh, what am I going to do? What if my business doesn't bring me back? What if my job at a restaurant doesn't bounce back like I hope? How can you use this time to maybe fulfill a calling that has been sitting dormant within you, that has been waiting to come out, that could be a natural gift that you could express, that could actually help others and bring more light into the world? That is the opportunity I think we have right now.
Seth, I so appreciate your language choices of using assets and capital in conjunction with things like artistic ability or your health, because it draws light to this very singular focus that we've been taught around money and wealth, and that assets and capital go to these little green pieces of paper that we carry around in our wallets or our purses. And then in turn, it probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest sources of stress, anxiety, maybe disruption in relationships. Why is it that, I mean, maybe you can speak a little bit to the psychology of that. Why is it that we've been taught, or that we fixate on those things in lieu of really acknowledging these other assets, these other levels of capital we have? Because gosh, when you look at it, especially if you're assessing 11 points and there's only one, which is what, 8%, 9%, that makes, I mean, it really, from that frame of mind, it gives us all a really empowering place of where we can really be supremely wealthy in a way that we may never even thought that was possible.
Yeah. When I do workshops, I have the 11 dimensions in like a pie chart, and people can go and take a look at it if they want to. Missionwealth.com, Redefining Wealth, you can take a look at that. But what happens is I have people rank each of those pie charts, each of those 11 pieces of the pie, with a F if they feel fulfilled in that category, or a U if they feel unfulfilled. And that's a totally subjective ranking, right? Mm-hmm. So when someone goes through and they see where their wheel is bumpy, like, wow, I've been neglecting these 3 pieces of my wealth pie. And, they can then go, wow, how can I, inflate those pieces? How can I put more investment of my time and my energy and other resources into those pieces? And it just creates kind of this aha. The reason why, to answer your question, Jesse, I think people have really been singularly focused on the one piece of the pie, which is the financial, is how we were raised and how we continue to be shaped by media. We see the lifestyles of the rich and famous, and the jets and the cars, and the rappers with the money, and all that stuff. It's all about material acquisition. And and depending on how old someone is, their parents or grandparents maybe were out of the World War II era, and it was all about conservation. You got to be careful, you got to be cautious. And those two mindsets really shape how people have thought that in order to be happy, I better go acquire, I better hoard, I better accumulate, even if it's at the expense of other people, even if it's at the expense of our planet, even if it's at the expense of my own personal well-being. And so that's where we need to wake up and realize that that's like fool's gold, right? Because I have clients with $20 million homes who aren't happy. And I've done service work all over the world, Honduras, Guatemala, all over, where they literally have almost nothing from a material perspective, and yet they're happy, they're fulfilled. So this mindset that I have to get the $10 million house to be happy, or the new car, or the new suit, or whatever the bling bling might be, it gives you momentarily senses of satisfaction, but then that goes away as soon as you see a nicer car, or your new shoes get scuffed, or someone else has, a bigger balance sheet than you. So I would just encourage people to realize what matters to you. It's not a societal definition, it's your own definition, and deploy your energies and your sense of self-worth there.
Seth, in the brief time I've known you, I've always been so inspired by the humanitarian type work you do around the world and with other organizations and for the climate. And I'm wondering if you could pick one, what is the wealthiest moment you've experienced in that kind of work?
Oh man, Jesse, it's really hard. I mean, probably by definition, it would be a service trip I took in Guatemala with my daughter. And I actually tell this story in my TED Talk, but I connected, I'm going to try not to cry during this, but I connected with a young girl while we were there. Her name is Debbie. And she was the most beautiful young girl. And every day I would go there and she would run to me. There's probably 30 kids in this orphanage, and it was just my daughter volunteering. Every day she would run to me, and we had this little ritual where we would go smell flowers, and I would have her smell first, and I would smell, and I'd make faces. And I put, they had chalks. I put like a chalk, and we did like a hopscotch, and we went and I like did a little tea party. There's a little teacup. She was 5 years old. And I fell in love with this little girl. She was just so amazing. And her familial story was tragic. And so I just felt so bad for her. And yet she was this light, right? She had this light, and she would put special bows in her hair, and, was really proud of her colored purple bows. And I remember as we were leaving on our last day there at the orphanage, I was playing with the other kids, but, Debbie was really close to me, and I was holding on to this tug at my heart, knowing I was going to have to say goodbye to her. And I was almost ready to adopt her, but they wouldn't let Americans adopt kids from Guatemala because of human trafficking and all sorts of bad stuff that had happened. So I knew that wasn't an option. I knew I had to say goodbye, and I knew I'd probably never see her again, and based on all the situation there. And so I said goodbye to all the other kids, and I waited to say goodbye to Debbie last. And I remember thinking, gosh, Seth, how come you didn't bring something for her? I was going to bring her a gift, and I didn't have a gift. And so I went to my backpack, and I looked in it to see if I had a piece of gum or something, and I found a penny. I had a shiny US penny. And so I got down on my knees, and I said to Debbie in Spanish, it has been such an amazing time getting to know you. You're an amazing young girl. You're going to do amazing things in your life, and keep smelling the flowers, keep having the tea parties, keep smiling, keep wearing those purple bows. And I said, I want you to know that you're always going to be with me, Debbie. You're always going to be here in my heart, and I believe in you. And so I opened my hand, and I gave her this penny as an acknowledgement of my caring for her and my belief in her. And I gave her a hug, and I, started to tear up. I didn't want her to see me, so I left, and my daughter said her goodbyes. And then when we got on the bus, one of these chicken buses in Guatemala to get back to our host family, my daughter Sage said, Dad, I took some photos, and I want to show you one. And so I said, okay. And so she was showing me the photos, and she knew how sad I was because she knew I was so connected to Debbie. And she said, look at this one. And she said, I walked up to Debbie after you had said goodbye to her, and she was standing there with her hand clenched. And she said, Debbie, what's in your hand? And she looked carefully, and she's like, tengo un regalo de su padre. I have a gift from your dad. And she opened up her hand slowly to show that penny in her hand to Sage. And Sage took a photo of that. And,
Wow.
She treasured that penny, and I treasured that penny, and I treasured that moment. And that level of connection when doing work is what makes it so meaningful.
It makes you wonder, what do the Debbies of the world have to teach us all?
Yeah, they can teach us a lot. How often have we taken a penny and just tossed it aside? It's worthless.
Yeah.
And so it's all about meaning, right? It's about meaning and where we attribute meaning. And meaning comes from connection. Meaning comes from purpose. My calling now is really around climate change, and I have a nonprofit, sustainablefuture.org, where I am trying to unify the community and communities, whether it's nonprofits, businesses, schools, toward positive actions we can all take to make a difference for a positive culture, for volunteerism. And that's where I'm finding meaning now, right? That's where I'm finding value is the more you give, the more you get. So whatever that looks like for someone, if it's volunteering at an animal shelter, if it's, picking up trash on the beach, if it's doing service work somewhere else, just find that meaning, because where there's meaning, there's worth, and where there's worth, there's value. And when there's value, there's just a whole other level of living that we all have available to us.
Seth, I'm curious, when you're talking with your clients about this and about finding this next level, this other level, where do you tell them to begin to look, or how do you tell them to begin to look? Because I can imagine that, again, when we're so in that laser focused mindset of where we're supposed to do, and especially with some of the folks you work with that are going to be this higher achiever, which I imagine then that becomes even a more myopic level of laser focusedness. How do you help? How can they begin to expand their vision, expand their sight, so they can start to look for and find that other level for them?
Right. Well, we always meet clients or, coaching clients where they are. So you can't just infuse contemplation and reflection and life purpose talks out of the blue. People care, and they want to retire in 2 years, and they want to buy a house, and they want to put their kids in college. And that takes, definite left brain thinking and strategies and techniques. So to tell you the truth, Jesse, typically where it comes is when there's been a wake-up call or a life event in someone's life. Mm-hmm. So they've just lost a loved one. They've just gone through a divorce. They've just, retired or sold their company. Like something's shaken their tree, right? And all of a sudden they're like, wait, I'm not who I thought I was. My sense of identity tied up in what I've done or who I was or my academic prowess or my business, or being a parent to an independent, to a young child, dependent child. That no longer is their definition. And so now they're in this space of receptivity. And it's almost like a portal into going from their head to their heart. And that's where usually you can start to help people tap into this calling and maybe these deferred dreams that they haven't listened to. And that's really the purpose of my retreats, is we catch people in those transitional moments of life where they are available to do the work. And that's where we talk about like life in 3 phases and how to design and ignite your life 3.0 vision. So it has more meaning, more purpose, more joy, more balance. You're no longer on the treadmill like you were. Now you have expansiveness available to you. And how can we craft that? And we do that for women. We do that for CEOs. We can do that for children. And it doesn't have to be, we don't have to wait until retirement, to then have a wake-up call. Let's have it now. And I usually find that, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So for some reason, we all get wake-up calls that kind of knock our bell to a degree. And I think for many, COVID is that bell, right? I think for many, COVID has been that wake-up call. So that's why, again, there's been a lot of tragedy through this. And I really feel for, obviously, the people who've lost loved ones, the people who are really suffering financially. And it is a new world as we're all trying to reinvent ourselves. But I also believe that it's a wake-up call. And I believe that there's a lot of transformation that's happening right now. And with that, it gives me hope and it gives me optimism.
Yeah, I so appreciate you acknowledging that, Seth. One of the greatest lessons my dad ever taught me was in death, and that my dad was, I think, a classic example of, defer until retirement, defer until retirement, defer until retirement. In his last couple of years of his life, when he got sick with cancer, he went through the chemo, the surgery, all those treatments and stuff, because he was so young, trying to gain more time so he could live. And literally 2 weeks before he passes away, he gets the handshake from the doctor, the congratulations, you beat cancer, you have your whole life in front of you. And my dad finally had taken the time to sit down, pulled out a piece of paper and a pen, and began to scribble out what his dream camping trip would be and the supplies he would need for it, where he would go, what it would look like. He had put this on, and he had bought a backpack. And then 2 weeks later, he's dead. And never got to have that trip, never got to go. And I remember, so my mom had sent me that backpack because the following year I was going to Peru to do Machu Picchu and Inca Trail. And when I opened the backpack up, I found that his list had been in it. And it just shook me so much, because what was so profound in it was the simplicity of the list. This was his big dream. And this was his life after cancer, his second shot, his new awakening. And it wasn't, a big REI shopping spree or anything like that. It was very simple, like a sleeping bag, a little water stove heater. It was the simplicity of the list. And that was what was so meaningful for him. And that was the thing that he put off for so long because of at the expense of everything else. And gosh, I'm with you. I feel like there is such an incredible opportunity right now for us to start to awaken. And it's not to minimize the value of working hard and pursuing those kinds of goals, but to awaken to the fact that, gosh, there is this whole big piece, like those other 10 pieces of the pie out there, that maybe those lessons are staring us in the face right now. Everybody's getting their simple camping trip list. And if we would just look at it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Jesse.
Yeah.
I'm sure that made your Machu Picchu trip that much more meaningful. Having that connection to your dad there. Maybe you're on the trail or close to being on the trail, which is such a sacred 4-day journey. I've done that too. One of the questions that I'll ask in a retreat, which can be pretty powerful, is, say you have one adventure left in you. What is it? Like, what's that one adventure that if on your deathbed, you don't have the opportunity to take it or do it, you would have regret. And that by adventure, it could be learning to play guitar. It could be rekindling with a sibling. It could be writing a book. It could be traveling around the world. It could be climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, whatever that adventure looks like to you. But, I think on our deathbed, people don't regret the things they've done. They regret the things they haven't done. And we have an opportunity to make that list today. We have an opportunity to write down what really wakes us up, what makes us come alive, and what is yearning to be more fully available to us. And why not flip and unpack that shit right now? Sorry, but why not make it happen and write your list, right? Choose your adventure. And, I like to think about, like, what advice would my older self give me today? Like, I just turned 50. If I was looking at my 90-year-old self, if I hopefully live that long, if I could sit down and have 90-year-old Seth with his, cute bald head looking at me 40 years younger than him, and I said, like, what could you tell me, older Seth? I would listen, right? Wouldn't you listen to your 90-year-old Jesse?
Yeah.
And what would that 90-year-old Jesse tell you? He'd probably tell you, like, stop worrying and tap into your heart, and don't overwork, overlove, and learn how to, be your fullest self, and bring your gifts even more fully, Jesse. Don't hold back. And those limitations you have are just self-made, all these things. And so I like to think about my guide, my old, wrinkled, bald, 90-year-old Seth guide, telling me how to live my life today. And that's what sometimes gives me that nudge when I'm feeling anxious or I'm not feeling brave to go do something that is a yearning for me to do. So I try to always know that, on the path of life, where there's a path that's familiar and unfamiliar, the unfamiliar path is the scary one, but it's also where there's the most growth. And I just encourage people to pick that path that they know is there, that maybe is scary, because that's where the best fruit is, right? The best fruit is not on the low-hanging branches. It's like out on the limbs. And let's go get the best fruit. Let's go out on those limbs and live our best life.
Love that. Seth, we just have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we touch on the sustainable future piece, because I know that's something you're deeply passionate about. And earlier you glanced on it briefly, so I'm hoping we can touch back on it. You're talking about working with people and organizations to develop specific actions that we could take to really be proactive in that. I'm wondering, maybe what are 2 or 3 actions that all of us could take right now that we could begin taking, maybe we're not taking, that are simple, everyday ones, to be more proactive in making a more sustainable future? Because you and I were sharing offline, one of the really neat things about this is hearing people talk about how the skies seem clearer, there's less traffic on the road, the water is clearer. And I mean, I remember one day very vividly walking outside thinking, wow, it really does smell a little fresher out here. And that could have been my hallucination, but it was a beautiful hallucination. And I think that there is so much to see. Like, one of the most telling things for me during this whole thing was the satellite photo that was shown over China, where it was showing I think it was the pollution output. And it was kind of chronicling it when it was at its apex of lockdown and how much that was reduced. So maybe there's a couple things that you could share with us that we could all begin doing to help continue that momentum that COVID has kind of forced us into building, of really being more sustainable for a future in a community.
Sure. Yeah, and I would encourage people to go to sustainablefuture.org, because we have a platform that you can have all sorts of actions, and you gamify it. You get points and badges and prizes and recognitions for doing the right thing. Here's a simple one that for whatever reason just drives me crazy. When people park their cars, assuming it's not an electric car, which most aren't, when they park their cars, a lot of times they'll sit idle, picking up their kids or waiting at the grocery store, and they let their car just run. And maybe they're checking emails, and they might sit there 5-10 minutes. The car's just running idle. Imagine if the millions of cars that are just left running idle for no reason. You can put your window down. You don't need to have the AC blasting. Stop doing that. How much less carbon output would happen? Just turn off your car when you park where you park. Like, that's like a simple one. Obviously, we have 6 categories of kind of environmental concerns. So transportation issues, like, the car issue, could also be biking, walking more, using mass transit, carpooling with friends, doing more virtual meetings instead of driving to meetings. Like, those are all ways to reduce the gallons of gas we consume per day per person. Another big one for me is waste, right? In Santa Barbara, the average person produces about 5 pounds of waste a day. Wow. And it's been tough with COVID because there's more and more, single use happening. But we all can easily have reusable Even if you get a plastic cup, use it multiple times, or plastic bag, use it multiple times. We don't need to be generating the level of trash we're generating, and just be mindful of, use a reusable mug. It's not that hard, right? We don't have to be so lazy and get a new cup, straw, stir every time we go get coffee. So, and coffee places will fill up a reusable mug. So waste is a big one. And trying to, source food locally is another big one. Like, it's crazy in Santa Barbara, a big percentage of the food that we produce is exported, and over 90% of the food we consume is imported. So we might be growing an apple here, sending it down there, and then the apple we buy at Trader Joe's is shipped to us from Chile. And it's like, if we could just source locally, you'd be saving a lot of the shipping and the cost and the waste, and it's actually healthier to eat local food. So there's many things we can do. I would just say be mindful and allow yourself to, I would say, get rid of the silo effect. Because what I find is that, there's so many great nonprofits in Santa Barbara, each one's doing fantastic work, but they're operating in a silo from each other. And my whole vision was to create a platform where nonprofits, businesses, schools, churches, public sector resources can come together under one guiding platform. And then we can leverage the strengths from this business, from this nonprofit, from this public resource, instead of living in these silos. So unsilo your mindset. Let's bring the community together, and let's make positive actions. And my big vision is, imagine if there was a dashboard that we could have real-time data across these metrics. Here's the cleanliness of air. Here's the amount of rainforest left. Here's amount of trash being produced. And if we could see improvement across those spectrums through each small action we took, each reusable mug we used, then we would feel part of something, and we'd feel like there was hope. And then we could see how that was making a positive impact when it comes to climate change. So that's my vision, is let's come together, let's not stay apart. And every little action we take does make a difference.
I love that idea of the board. That's just so brilliant. I mean, I do it with my car when I drive. I make games with myself if I'm driving longer than 20 minutes about trying to get the eco part up at the better level, to just see if I can put it up. And just that little digital thing, it's incredible the level of accountability it gives me to try to be that little bit more responsible, that little less pressure on the gas pedal.
And we were part of something called the Eco Challenge during the month of April. There were 818 teams globally that participated, including like corporate teams like Salesforce. This is the first year Santa Barbara participated. And we came in 14th out of 818 teams globally, doing a bunch of these small actions. And we had students from local high schools and junior highs. We had business people. We had all sorts of types of people involved in it. So when you make it a challenge and you make it kind of fun, maybe it's a challenge within your team that we set up that ties to your corporate culture. It's a challenge within your school. And then you have schools compete against schools, and classrooms compete against classrooms, and departments in your company compete against departments. It keeps people engaged. It makes it fun. You have a leaderboard, so people get rewarded for those who are taking those little steps like you're talking about. So making it public, making people aware, and then making it part of your culture. And maybe it's volunteerism. Maybe it's not sustainability. Maybe it's health and workouts. Whatever positive actions you want to promote, doing it in this gamified way can be very, very impactful.
Seth, I want to be respectful of time. This is that ish part I was telling you about, where selfishly I want to keep going, but I want to be respectful. So I'm hoping this last question, I can talk to 90-year-old Seth and pick his brain of wisdom. 90-year-old Seth, I want to come back to Debbie. What level of impact at 90 years old, what legacy has Debbie created in your life?
She's taught me to lead from my heart. And she taught me it's okay to be a vulnerable leader, and to really care for others in a deep way. And that in doing so, that is true wealth.
Well, now that we have two grown men crying, I better quickly sum this up. Everyone, my goodness, what a treat this has been. Rewatch, re-listen, take notes, and most important, implement. Seth took us on this incredible journey of what redefining wealth is, and considering that there's 11 metrics available that we can use to measure wealth. Of one of which only one is actually comes down to the money that's in your pocket. And in considering that I love how he interchanged those terms that we commonly associate with financial wealth, capital, assets, and used it to talk about our artistic capital, the assets of our physical health, and how we have these other assets, these other capital systems that we can develop and really utilize. The notion of looking at right now to the wake up, not waiting until retirement to start to live, and to be instead of being the human doing all the time, to start being more of a human being right now. The amazing value of a penny, learned from a 5-year-old little girl at an orphanage in Guatemala, a story that I certainly could feel, and I'm sure you felt too. And I think that's the feeling piece of it that's so important. It's the connection piece. It's the truth in it, that we all know deep down that once we get aside from the material thing, this isn't to make small of the material stuff. I think it's wonderful to have material once and enjoy some of those comforts in life, but often it's the understanding of what true wealth can be and where it really impacts us the most. And that's why we feel those stories of the Debbies of the world and the value of a penny. Hopefully that you'll leave from today and look at a penny a little bit differently. The idea of looking at environmental change and what we can all do. Gosh, I was thinking about just the other day when I put my car on idle because I was too lazy to turn it off because it was a little warmer, and I could have rolled the windows down, shut it off, but instead I sat there and let the air conditioning. And then the math in my head was very quickly, 1 million cars at 5 minutes idle. Gosh, that's a lot of an impact that we can make right away. And it goes to the notion that really it is the small little incremental things that each of us can do, because sometimes I definitely have that voice and says, well, what can I do? What good can I do? What difference can I make? But it's not a me, it's a we. And if we all make those little tiny impacts, if we all reduce our trash, our waste, instead of 5 pounds to 4.5, a half a pound's not a much, but over a whole populace, a whole community, that is a massive shift. And then to come full circle about, gosh, the opportunity to lead from your heart. And it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to love. It's okay to really tap into what matters most. Many of us have shared those stories where we'll see someone who seems to have less than us, and we often wonder, how can they be so happy? And maybe, just maybe, there's some wisdom in there that we haven't tapped into, and this provides the inspiration to revisit those own stories that you've experienced in your life. And maybe they too, the Debbies of your life will be your guides to leading from your heart in greater capacity. Seth, this has been such an extraordinary blessing, man. Thank you so very much for sharing. I deeply appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, Jesse. It was a beautiful experience, and thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time, everyone, on another edition of A Handful of Hope. Bye-bye.